So when you look into how the slave trade actually functioned, that's very dark and it's very scary. I want you and the 60 other men on this boat to go and catch 300 of these big black African dudes from 20 miles inland somehow. Think you can pull that off?
What's the darkest part of history that you've recently discovered?
That I've recently discovered. The darkest part of history. The darkest part of history I've been diving into recently is the real history of what Western Africa was like before white people got there. And I'm speaking as a half-black man, and I know I'm going to get loads of hate from this. How bad South Africa was before white people got there, and how the slave trade worked, and how the slave trade in the United States was able to bring over so many African men, my ancestors, to that continent. And history today teaches you that evil white people went over to Western Africa, shot people and captured people and won these fights and got all these black people and put them on boats and moved them across to America. And the white man's the evilest person ever. And it's always been a narrative I've never been 100% comfortable with. And I'm not going to say everything I know here because I can talk on the subject now for 2 or 3 hours. But I would encourage people to look into what the slave trade really was and how it really happened and how it was so easy to do. And I'll give you a thought experiment. You're quite a fit, athletic young man, 23 years of age. Okay, imagine you are a British sailor. Okay, same build you are now. You've been sailing for 3 months on this little wooden ship, eating nothing but hardtack. You got scurvy, you're sick, you're malnutrition. Okay, we put you on the coast of Africa. It's 49 degrees. Okay, you're in a thick red cotton jacket, and I give you a musket, a gun, a weapon of death. And I say, okay, here we are. I want you and the 60 other men on this boat to go and catch 300 of these big black African dudes from 20 miles inland, but you're not allowed to shoot them. No, you have to get them on the boat without hurting them. Somehow. You think you could pull that off? Me, you, the people in this room? 0% chance. I know you're not allowed to say it because you're whiter than me. You're not mixed race. You can't say, oh, that doesn't make sense.
I think I have an idea of who could pull it off.
Yeah, but exactly. All the other black people who had all these wars with each other and were waiting on the beach with all their fellow Africans saying, here, take them, give us some more guns, we'll win the next war. Easy, boom, shoot half of them, capture half of them. And the slave trade just worked like this. So when you look into how the slave trade actually functioned, that's very dark and it's very scary, especially when you understand how much they're trying today, to this point, to completely use propaganda to tell you it happened the way we were originally taught. No. Western Africa was not filled with great, amazing golden buildings and kings and stuff. And people like Mansa Musa, who was indeed the king of Timbuktu, who was arguably the richest man in history, is a great historical figure. And there are some, and Africans have their own history, and I'm not taking them away from that. But the dark, depraved way that Western Africans enslaved their own people and gave them away for tobacco, for bullshit, to Western white people is incredibly scary. I'd also tell people to look into, ever heard of the Barbary Wars?
I think so. I don't know much about
the Barbary Wars is very simple. The Barbary Wars was America's first conflict as an independent power. So America beat England. No, English people beat other English people. It was a civil war. You then called yourself something different. I'll still stand by the English on that point. But the state of America had just finished their war against the crown. The colony of America had won their war against the British crown. And their first ever war, because it wasn't a superpower back then, was with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was the Turkish Empire, which ruled all of modern Dubai, Turkey. Their capital, I believe, was Istanbul, and all of North Africa. And these people had a slave trade. You know who they used to enslave?
White people.
Americans, specifically. Because if you enslaved white British people or white Spanish people, the Spanish and the British, who were very scary, who had their big navy, would come and fight with you. So they'd wait for American ships and they'd capture you, enslave white Americans. Again, very barbaric. They'd castrate every single man they got their hands on, rape all the women, use them as sex slaves, etc. And the Ottoman Empire was enslaving white Americans. And this is a very dark thing to look into, because Americans specifically are taught that slavery was something unique that happened to black people within the United States, that white people perpetrated. But you don't understand that America had to build a navy and fight its first ever conflict because Thomas Jefferson was sent to London to speak with the Ottoman emissary. And he said, stop doing this to us, stop capturing our people. He said, no, I have the right to do this if I want. What are you gonna
This
do?
was millions of white people, right?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I wouldn't say millions, definitely hundreds of thousands. Every American ship they could get their hands on, and Chinese ships and ships that they didn't think were dangerous to them. But the Americans engaged in their first ever conflict, the Barbary conflict, the Barbary Wars. Look them up. And America had to go and put a stop to another slave trade way before they put a stop to their own slave trade. And then it was the British who outlawed slavery initially. But the Barbary Wars and the transatlantic slave trade, the more you dig into it, the sicker and more evil you see today's propaganda. People in the past were sick and evil and did all sorts of fucked up and evil things. But it's the juxtaposition with today's propaganda and what really happened that's really scary.